Good morning, everyone. So today I'm going to present a work done with various colleagues at IFPRI, including Will Martin, that is here. And that actually is a nice combination of a thread of work that we have started in PIM and specific requests coming from the World Bank on this issue. Because one of the big questions is, as you know, we are globally providing a large support to farmers. Even in some countries, they are still basically taxed by government policies. And in the current context where producing food and raising income for farmers is important, we have other policy goals to take into account, including managing the carbon credit that we want to allocate to agriculture and dealing with greenhouse gas emission. So one of the key questions here is to know is, are we putting the incentive in the right place? And if we look at the various policy instruments that we use to support agriculture, are they contributing to increase greenhouse gas emission or reducing them? And the next step of the analysis will be to know, okay, now, based on what we are going to see, if we want to reallocate money across policy instruments, can we get a better outcome in terms of here greenhouse gas emission, knowing that we still have to feed people, and actually that we also need to provide good income for people involved in agricultural production, meaning the political economy of the part. That is not a small one. So, of course, the different set of farm policies and in-farm policies, I also include trade policies that impact prices of agricultural commodities, have a significant impact on how the farm sector produces things, so the how, but also how much we produce, where we produce, and actually when we think about the agricultural production as a total, what type of product we do within this. More pulses, more corn, this type of question. And both subsidies and price incentives are going to shift all these aspects. The one we are not going to really tackle in detail in this analysis is how we produce things. You know, what is the choice of technology we use when we have decided to produce this amount of corn in this location of the world, which technology we use. Some of the incentives, like fertilizer subsidies, are relatively easy to track and to measure their impact, but other elements regarding technology adoption are a bit more complex, so we are not going really to enter this, but also in some cases they are tied to specific details of the policy. Basically, all the conditionality you can put to a policy, and you have question of enforceability, and so on. So, in the presentation, I'm going to cover relatively quickly a few items, just to give you the background in terms of where these emissions are, what type of policy we are actually talking about, and then we were going to see what's happened when we remove these policies in terms of greenhouse gas emission using our modeling framework. So, about the modeling framework we are going to use, actually, we need a model, and here it will be the Miragodep computable generic revenue model that we use in-house with a lot of details. But we need data to feed the model. And here I'm talking about agricultural policies and greenhouse gas emission. And even if there is a huge improvement done in the past, including thanks to the PIM support, to the Ag Incentive Consortium, for instance, that bring together the work done by various institutions in terms of monitoring agricultural policies, both on the subsidy side and on the price support side. And the price support will include measures related to trade policies, export restriction, and so on. So they are quite actually important. Until now, we didn't have this harmonized data system that both reproduce and is consistent with the greenhouse gas emission accounting that is done within the UN system, and where basically FAO is a key player in terms of managing one of the most detailed data sets that try to provide you information in terms of emission through different sources for different sectors for different countries, but they have their own underlying data in terms of production and so on, and the policy data set that is managed at the institutional level by the OECD, by the Inter-American Development Bank, by the MAFAP project at FAO that also use different underlying data sets. So actually, you need to harmonize everything in order to have the proper amount of corn with the proper amount of support and the proper amount of emission. And in this work also, we expand a bit the greenhouse gas emission accounting done by FAO in order to take into account more updated data on energy use, fertilizer use, and actually pesticide. So it's about improving existing data set and making them consistent in order to fit in one consistent modeling framework. So now if we look at the overall distribution of emissions, here you have a table with double entry by source of emission and by sectors. Everything add up to 100%. And if you can see where the action takes place, basically you have the livestock sectors with a significant amount of emission linked to enteric fermentation and manure, and the rice cultivation. Most of these greenhouse gas emissions are actually coming from methane, not directly CO2. We can discuss actually some technical issue between accounting for carbon and methane, but here we use a standard UN IPCC principle using tier 1 approach. But already we know that we are going to deal with two hotspots, and actually these hotspots are heavily biased by existing policies. Now, in terms of policies, what type of big picture you want to have in mind is overall, we are talking about more than 600 billion of farm support, depending from one year to another. 1/3 of it will come from market price support, so it's support to farmers giving by prices, domestic prices that are above what a free market will deliver to them. 1/3 going to basically couple subsidies, including on input subsidies. So the more you produce, the more subsidies you get. And another third that is about either decoupled subsidies, historical payment done in the European Union, or investment in agriculture R&D and things like this. So things that will generate support to the farm sectors and potentially in a much better way than the traditional subsidies. In terms of import tariffs, average in agriculture is still 17%, so it's basically more than 5 times that we see in the rest of the economy. So trade policy are still highly protectionist from farm agriculture. But you see that we see basically spike of protection for rice and livestock products. So at the same time, we are protecting a lot the products that are generating a large amount of emission. But protecting this product doesn't mean that overall it increases production, because taxing product, first of all, limit consumption. The big things of this tariff is where we produce, not so much how much we produce in terms of emission, because actually this tariff limit production, so limit consumption at the global level. And with this global analysis, we are going to start to understand this trade-off, okay? There is a global issue about how much food and agricultural production we have, but then there is a question of where we are going to do it, and it's where this trade policy will play an important role. And depending where you are the more efficient in terms of greenhouse gas emission to produce versus how you are more efficient in terms of economic terms, the actual trade-offs are different. So this table just kind of summarizes what I was just saying, that when you provide coupled subsidies, we know that coupled subsidies are going to be inefficient in terms of economic terms and in terms of emission, because they are going to lead to more emission without so much constraints, when the market price support will have a differentiated effect. So what's happened if we remove coupled subsidies in agriculture? So if globally, except that here, what I will call globally is the countries that are monitored by the OECD. So think about G20 countries plus OECD. So we'll have India and China, but here we will not have Tanzania or Ethiopia, for instance, in this first version of the work. So if we remove these subsidies, emissions go down by 34 kilotons of CO2 equivalent per year. So it's a bit less than 1% of ag emission. And we will see that a significant amount of this reduction in emission will come from fertilizers and a bit from the reduction of the livestock sectors. because here you have a lot of fertilizer link subsidies. Now, if we remove tariffs, if we remove various export restriction measures, including in India, that where a number of policies are basically providing a price to Indian farmers below the world market, so they are not benefiting from an actual protection, but an actual deprotection coming from the various policies. Here we are going to see an increase in emission by more than 2.4%. So what it means is that by removing all these policies, we are going to basically reduce the prices of agricultural products in many places, leading to more consumption and therefore more production. So overall, these type of policies are limiting agricultural production globally, either by providing disincentive, as I've said, to Indian farmers, or disincentive to consumers, let's say, of sugar in the US. So when we are going to remove it, we are going to have this extension effect. But behind it, you will see a relocation of production. For instance, removing these trade barriers will reduce emission from China and from the EU, because they are going to outsource their production in other locations. That will see an increase, in particular, Australia, Brazil, with a strong effect driven by livestock product. So now conclusion. In time, we have to be careful. We have started to play a bit about some of the implications of these scenarios by saying what's happened if we increase productivity, knowing that increasing productivity in itself may not reduce your emission. Increasing your productivity, well, you know it maybe from the Jevons paradox, but basically you are making agriculture more efficient, you are going to push people to invest more in agriculture, prices are going down, people are going to consume more. So maybe welfare gain, economic development, but in terms of greenhouse gas emission, economic growth itself has never been a good news, okay? So we have to be very important about the quality of this economic growth. And here it will be the same thing. What is the quality of the technology that are going to drive these productivity gains? And one of the conclusions is, if we manage to target technology that actually reduce emission first of all, that will be good. If you just increase yield without having a specific story about emission, that will not be nice. Here, just an example about the livestock emission, where today, here you have the total livestock emission from the different countries in the world. And what will happen if we just bring the whole world to the 75 percentiles in terms of efficiency. So basically, we say that the whole world in terms of emission, in terms of kilogram of meat, GHG per kilogram of meat, or GHG per liter of milk, if we bring it to a level of technology like South Africa, for instance, we can cut emission by half. So actually, of course, we can push the frontier, but there is a lot of adopting existing technology that can help bridging the gap. So, of course, you can discuss about changing diets and how it will be done later today. But just even with the type of diet we have, and if we manage to make sure that the policy we use help to get better adoption of the good technology today, we can significantly cut the emission coming from agriculture. In the coming year, we are going to work a bit more on some dynamic baseline, meaning that today we are looking at the situation today. So, of course, with different economic growth and demographic growth in the next 15 years, who has to do what in terms of emerging country will shift a bit. In this analysis, we were just looking at greenhouse gas emission from the production side, not the land use side. So in what I have shown up to now, I didn't include land use. I can explain you why we didn't do it up to now, but why also it's not so much, I would say, a technical difficulty. It's more a political one when it's about starting to think what is going to happen to the land that we are using today and that we are going to stop to use in particular in developed economies. What is their actual carbon value? Are we taking their potential carbon sequestration, or something that we have seen in the past, like, of course, you remove cropland, but you get a kind of grassland, because it changes drastically any carbon accounting we do on this part. So this is where the assumption we make have to be important. And we are going to add other, in particular, African countries on which we start to have good data in terms of policies too. Thank you.
Thank you to you, David.